My hand was trembling when I saw him. That small child, barely 5 years old, sitting on the floor and crying so hard that the entire office seemed to fall silent around him. "Mama! I want Mama!" he screamed, tears streaming down his face, lines of pain etched across his innocent features. This wasn't the first time I'd seen Cody in the office. He often came here when his father, Simon Kane, was stuck in late meetings. I'd noticed him several times before, sitting quietly in the reception area with his coloring books, or sometimes waiting outside Simon's cabin, swinging his little legs from the oversized chairs. But today was different. Today he was in pain, and nobody dared to go near him. I lifted my eyes from my work, but not a single person had the courage to approach him, because he wasn't just any child. He was Simon Kane's son, the CEO of our company, whose very name made people shake with fear. I was just a junior assistant, newly hired, and I knew that any wrong move here meant one thing: losing my job. But when I saw that child suffering and nobody even looking at him properly, my heart clenched tight in my chest. Staff members were looking at each other, whispering among themselves. "Don't touch him, Simon, sir, is coming," someone said in a hushed tone. "That's his son. If you lay even a finger on him, you'll be out." Everyone stood frozen in fear. But I couldn't bear to hear his crying. I tried to convince myself, "Kevin, don't go. You'll lose your job. You're new here. You don't have the right to challenge anyone." But then I noticed, one of his feet was slightly raised, and from his face it was clear that he was in pain. His ankle must have twisted somehow. I couldn't stop myself. I took one long breath and moved forward. "Hey buddy," I said softly, crouching down to his height. He looked at me with his tear-filled eyes, his crying momentarily pausing as he caught his breath. "What happened? Does your foot hurt?" I kept my voice gentle, because I knew, more than fear, he needed courage right now. He nodded his head and started crying again, but this time a little softer. "Mama, I don't have her with me," he whispered. My heart broke into pieces. I understood. This child wasn't just in physical pain, he was feeling completely alone. And I didn't know what I was doing. But before lifting him, I carefully examined his ankle. This was something my mother had taught me when I was young. When someone is in pain, first look at where it hurts, then touch them carefully. I gently checked Cody's ankle. "Cody, I'm going to apply a little pressure now. Okay? If it hurts too much, tell me." I pressed softly around his ankle area with my fingers. That technique my father had taught me when he explained that understanding pressure points was essential. Cody winced slightly, but then relaxed. This feels a bit better," he said in a tired voice. I smiled and said, "Yes, because this helps reduce the pain a little. My dad taught me, when someone has a twist, you should do it like this." Then I placed my hand under his ankle and gently provided support. "Now I'm going to lift you. Okay? Very carefully." I took him in my arms, very carefully, as if he were made of glass. And as soon as I held him close to my chest, he became a bit calmer. "Who are you?" he asked in that exhausted voice. "Kevin," I said with a smile. "And you're Cody, right?" He nodded. "Yes." "You made my pain less?" he said innocently. I understood that there was no doctor here, and I needed to take him somewhere safe. I adjusted him in my arms and headed straight toward the reception. The staff was still watching me as if I'd committed some crime. But I didn't care, because I knew even if I got fired, it would be for the right reason. And then suddenly, the elevator opened, and standing right in front of me was Simon Kane. His eyes were on me, then on Cody. I couldn't control myself. My heart stopped beating. This was the moment where everything was about to end. His expression was unreadable, that stern CEO face that gave nothing away. But there was something in the way he looked at his son in my arms, something that flickered for just a second before his professional mask returned. The lobby felt like it had grown colder, the air thick with tension. I could feel every pair of eyes in that reception area burning into my back. The security guard near the elevator shifted uncomfortably, clearly uncertain whether to intervene. Simon's suit was perfectly pressed, his tie exactly straight, everything about him screaming control and authority. But his son was clinging to my shirt, tiny fists grabbing the fabric, and I could feel Cody's rapid heartbeat against my chest. The child wasn't crying anymore, but he wasn't let go either. Simon took one step forward, and I instinctively held Cody a little tighter, protective in a way that surprised even me. This wasn't my child, this wasn't my responsibility, but in that moment, nothing else mattered except making sure he was safe. The silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating. I opened my mouth to explain, to apologize, to do something, but no words came out. My throat felt dry, my mind racing through 1,000 possible outcomes, none of them good. Then Simon's gaze dropped to Cody's ankle, slightly swollen and elevated in my careful grip. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. When his eyes met mine again, there was something different in them. Not just anger or authority, but a question, a challenge maybe, or perhaps just confusion about why a junior assistant would risk everything for a child he barely knew. The elevator doors started to close behind him, but he put his hand out to stop them, making a decision in that split second that would change everything. "How did you dare touch him?" Simon's voice was so cold that it felt like someone had poured ice water over me. I froze in place. Cody was pressed against my chest, and he was quiet now, exhausted, maybe even frightened seeing his father like this. Before I could even speak, I understood that this was the moment where my life could change in a second. Either I would walk out of here, or I didn't know what else. "Sir, I kept control over my words, because I knew that saying anything in panic would be dangerous." He fell down. His ankle twisted. Nobody was going near him, and I kept my voice steady. He was crying. I checked his ankle, used that technique my father taught me. Pressure points can provide pain relief. Then I was taking him to the first aid room. Simon stared at me intensely. His jaw was tight, his hands were in his pockets, and his eyes held that expression that only people with authority have. "Pressure points?" he questioned. "How do you know about that?" I held my breath and answered, "My father, he was a physiotherapist. He taught me basic techniques when I was a child. I thought maybe it would give Cody some relief." Simon didn't say anything for a few seconds, just looked at his son, who now had his head resting on my shoulder. "The staff knows not to touch my son," Simon finally said, but now his voice was slightly softer than before. "You're new here?" "Yes, sir." 2 weeks, I replied. Cody lifted his head from my shirt and whispered, "Papa, he's nice. He made my pain less." Simon looked at his son, then at me. For a few seconds he didn't say anything. I couldn't understand whether I should feel relieved or scared. Then Simon took a step forward and extended his arms. "Cody, come to me." But Cody shook his head. "No, I'm hurting. Kevin holds me carefully, and he me feel better." I couldn't believe this child was using my name. Warmth spread through my chest. Maybe happiness, maybe nervousness. Simon's eyes were now on me, and this time there was curiosity in them. "First aid room," he said. "Now, and you come with me." He turned back and signaled to security, and we started walking. I was carrying Cody alongside him, and the staff members' faces still held those expressions. Surprise and shock. When we entered the first aid room, Simon closed the door himself. I laid Cody on the cot, very carefully. "Show me your foot," I said. He brought his left ankle forward, and it was slightly swollen. "This will hurt a little. Okay?" I took the bandage and prepared a cloth compress. But first I used that technique again. Gently touched the pressure points around his ankle in a circular motion. Cody winced a bit but then relaxed. "Papa, look," he said. "It really works." Simon stood there, arms crossed, watching me intently. I quickly applied the compress and wrapped the bandage. When I finished wrapping Cody's ankle, I looked at him and smiled. "Better now?" He nodded. "Yes. Much better. Thank you, Kevin." Then he looked at Simon. "Papa, Kevin is really good. He helped me and did that special thing that made the pain go away." Simon placed his hand on his son's head. "Yes, I saw that." Then he looked at me, and there was now a bit of respect in his expression. "What was your name?" "Kevin Harper, sir," he said with a completely serious expression. "You did well. And what you did, that technique, it actually works." I noticed Cody relaxed. He paused. "But next time, inform me immediately." I nodded. "Yes, sir." Then he picked up Cody and opened the door. But before leaving, he said in a voice that only I could hear, "Thank you, Kevin." And I stood there, my hands still shaking. Because I knew this was just the beginning. I watched them walk away, Cody's small hand wrapped around his father's neck, the child's eyes growing heavy with exhaustion. Simon's broad shoulders carried his son effortlessly, and there was a gentleness in the way he held Cody that completely contradicted the cold CEO persona. Everyone feared. As they disappeared around the corner, I became aware of my surroundings again. The first aid room suddenly felt too small, too quiet. I looked down at my hands. They were slightly stained with the ointment I'd applied to Cody's ankle. My shirt had wrinkles where the child had gripped it tightly, evidence of something that felt surreal, like it had happened to someone else. I cleaned up the supplies, putting everything back in its proper place, my mind replaying every second of the encounter. The way Simon had looked at me wasn't just anger or surprise. There was something else underneath, something I couldn't quite identify. Protection maybe, or recognition, as if he'd seen something in me that made him pause, made him reconsider whatever harsh words he'd been planning to say. Walking back to my desk felt like moving through water. Everything seemed slower, heavier. Colleagues avoided my eyes, pretending to be absorbed in their work, but I could feel their attention following me. Nobody said anything directly, but the atmosphere had shifted. I'd crossed an invisible line that separated regular employees from the inner circle, that sacred space around Simon Kane that nobody dared to penetrate. My computer screen glowed with unfinished reports, emails that needed responses, tasks that suddenly seemed trivial compared to what had just happened. I tried to focus, tried to slip back into the comfortable anonymity of being just another junior assistant, but my mind kept wandering back to that small weight in my arms. Those trusting eyes looking up at me, that tiny voice saying my name. What had I done? I'd potentially jeopardized my entire career for a child I didn't know, using techniques my father had shown me years ago during lazy Sunday afternoons, when he'd explain his work to me. Those memories felt closer now, more vivid. My father's patient voice, his careful hands, his belief that knowledge was meant to be used to help others. He would have been proud, I thought, or maybe he would have called me reckless. Probably both. The next morning when I arrived at the office, everything seemed normal, or at least, I wanted to think so. But as soon as I stepped near my desk, I noticed people were watching me. Some were smiling, others just giving sideways glances. "Look, that's Kevin," someone whispered. "The one who picked up Simon Sir's son yesterday and reduced his pain. I heard he used some special technique." I sat down in front of my laptop and tried to focus. I knew this wasn't normal. Why were people staring at me? By lunchtime I understood. A senior manager named Liam came to my desk. "Hey Kevin, Sir is calling you to his cabin," he said. My heart sank. I knew what this call meant. Either you were getting a promotion or you were being let go. And I was certain my case was the latter. I took a deep breath and went upstairs. When I stood in front of the cabin door, my hand was shaking. I knocked. "Come in." It was Simon's voice. I opened the door and went inside. Simon was sitting in his chair, laptop in front of him, his face completely expressionless. "Sit, Kevin." I sat in the chair and waited. He looked at me and then pushed a folder forward. "Your file," he said. I couldn't understand what was happening. "Sir, if I did something—" "I reviewed your work," he interrupted me. "You joined 2 weeks ago, punctual, focused, and responsible." He paused slightly. "What you did yesterday wasn't part of your responsibilities. But you helped Cody, and he mentioned your name again this morning." I couldn't say anything. "How is he?" I asked without thinking. Simon smiled for the first time, just a little. "Better. The ankle is healing, and your technique," he said, it gave him considerable relief. "He says he wants to see you." Hearing this made my heart beat faster. "Me?" I laughed awkwardly. "Why?" "Because he trusted a stranger for the first time," Simon answered directly. "And you didn't make him feel alone. You understood his pain and actually gave him relief." I didn't know how to respond. "Sir, I just wanted him not to be hurt." Simon looked at me intently, as if judging my words. Then he stood up from his chair and said, "You're being transferred." My heart dropped. "Transfer? Sir, did I do something?" "You'll now shift from admin department to work on my floor," he said, reporting directly to me. I was shocked into silence. "But, sir, I'm just a junior assistant. Cody needs someone who can be reliable for him," Simon explained. He often stays here when I'm in late meetings. There's a nanny, but Cody isn't comfortable with her. And seeing your responsibility and patience, plus the fact that you have basic medical knowledge, I'm confident you're right for this job. He signed a form and gave it to me. You start Monday. You can go now. I stood up, my head spinning. But before leaving I asked, Sir, if I may ask, where is Cody's mother? Simon's expression became heavy for a second. He closed his eyes and then opened them. She's not here. She left a year after Cody was born. It was an accident. His voice held that pain that no parent can hide. I realized I'd asked too much. I'm sorry, sir. I didn't. It's okay, he said. Just take care of Cody properly. He might get attached to you. And I need someone who actually understands him. And I left from there. In my hand was that letter that was going to change my entire life. In my heart was a question: was I really ready to take on this responsibility? But there was another feeling, one I couldn't understand. Something for both Simon and Cody that was perhaps more than just work. I walked back to my desk in a daze, the transfer letter feeling heavier than it should in my hand. The implications were enormous. Working directly under the CEO, being responsible for his son, entering a world that was completely different from the admin department where I'd been safely anonymous. My colleagues would see this as either an incredible opportunity or a setup for spectacular failure. Maybe both were true. Sitting down at my desk, I stared at the letter without really reading it. The words blurred together as my mind raced through scenarios. What would my new responsibilities actually entail? Would I still do regular assistant work? Or would my primary job be watching over Cody? The boundary between professional and personal seemed dangerously thin, and I'd already crossed lines I didn't even know existed. Liam passed by again, this time with a knowing look. Big changes, huh? He said, not quite a question. Simon doesn't usually bring people up to his floor this quickly. You must have made quite an impression. His tone wasn't envious or bitter, just observational, like he was stating a fact about the weather. I managed a weak smile but didn't trust myself to respond properly. The afternoon dragged on slowly. I tried to finish my current projects, knowing that by Monday everything would be different. My desk would be different. My responsibilities would be different. Even the people around me would be different. I thought about Cody sitting in that big reception area, coloring quietly while his father worked late. I thought about how small he'd felt in my arms, how his crying had stopped when he felt safe. Was that what this was really about? Safety? Simon had lost his wife. Cody had lost his mother, and now they were navigating life as a duo in a world that probably felt too big and too harsh. The corporate environment wasn't designed for childhood grief or single parenting. It was cold, efficient, focused on results and bottom lines. No wonder nobody had rushed to help when Cody was hurt. They saw a risk, liability, potential problems. But I'd seen a child in pain. Nothing more, nothing less. And maybe that simplicity was what made Simon pause, what made him reconsider his initial anger. Or maybe he was just desperate, tired of trying to balance everything alone, willing to take a chance on someone who'd shown even a moment of genuine care. Either way, my life had shifted on its axis, and I wasn't sure if I should feel excited or terrified. As 5 o'clock approached and people started packing up, I found myself wondering what Cody was doing right now. Was his ankle still bothering him? Was he thinking about our encounter, or had it already faded into the general blur of childhood memories? Would Monday be awkward, or would he greet me with that same innocent trust he'd shown yesterday? I gathered my things slowly, that transfer letter tucked carefully into my bag. Tomorrow was Friday, then the weekend, and then everything would change. 2 days to mentally prepare myself for a job I didn't fully understand, working for a man who intimidated everyone around him, caring for a child who'd already found a way past my carefully constructed professional boundaries. 2 days to figure out if I was making the biggest mistake of my life or stumbling into something that might actually matter. The evening air outside was cool and crisp. I walked to the subway station, letting the crowd carry me along. Just another anonymous person in a sea of faces. But inside, something had fundamentally shifted. I wasn't just Kevin Harper, junior assistant, anymore. I was Kevin Harper, the man who dared to help Simon Kane's son. And somehow, that made all the difference. Monday arrived, and for the first time I stood on Simon Kane's private floor. Everything here was different. Large glass walls, soundproof cabins, and an atmosphere of complete silence. I approached my desk, positioned directly outside Simon's cabin. My job title was now executive assistant to CEO, and it was genuinely difficult to believe. Just a week ago I'd been a junior assistant, and now I sat directly in front of Simon. "Kevin," Cody's voice rang out. I turned around to see him approaching with his crutch, Simon's hand resting protectively on his shoulder. "Cody, careful," Simon said. When Cody saw me, that excitement lit up his eyes. The kind children get when they see someone they've been waiting for. "You said you'd be here today," he exclaimed. "I'm here," I said with a smile, crouching down to his height. "How's your foot?" "Better. Papa took me to the doctor. They said I did the right thing when I used your technique. They said your father was smart," Cody said happily. I laughed, feeling moisture prick my eyes. "Yes, he was very smart." I looked at his crutch. "So now you've become a captain, right? You look like a hero with that crutch." Cody burst into laughter. Simon looked at me and said something I'd never expected. "Kevin, Cody will stay here today. I have meetings until afternoon. Can you handle him?" I was surprised. Yes, sir. Absolutely." Simon nodded and before entering his cabin said, "If there's any problem, ankle or anything else, you know what to do." Cody sat beside me. He opened his bag and pulled out his crayons. "Will you draw with me?" he asked. I laughed. "Yes, why not?" And then came that strange moment where I wasn't working. I was simply coloring pictures with a child. I didn't know why, but it felt good, as if everything was happening naturally. Around noon when Simon emerged, he found Cody playing a game on my laptop screen while I reviewed reports. Simon gave an odd expression, something like surprised and perhaps satisfied. "Cody, break time," he announced. Cody looked at me and said, "Kevin, come with me tomorrow. Papa said we're going to the park." I was shocked. "Park?" I glanced at Simon. He adjusted his tie and said, "Yes. It's the weekend. Cody needs to get outside and he wants you to come." Simon paused. "If you're comfortable, I'm comfortable, sir," I quickly said. Simon nodded. "All right. Tomorrow morning at 10. I'll send you the address." After they left, I sat there contemplating what was happening. Was I really just staff, or was this becoming something else? The next morning, when I reached the park, I saw Simon and Cody were already there. Cody spotted me and immediately tried to rush back. But Simon stopped him. "Crutch. Cody, be careful." I smiled and walked toward them. "Good morning." "Morning," Simon replied, and for the first time I saw him in casual clothes, simple jeans and a shirt. He looked different, less intimidating, more human. Cody grabbed my hand. "Kevin, look, I want to go on the swing." I glanced at his crutch. "Cody, not yet. Once your foot heals, I'll be careful," he promised. Simon came closer. "He's difficult to manage," he said. "He's stubborn." I laughed. "I know." And then we watched Cody play together. He headed toward the slide and I immediately went to his side. "If it hurts, tell me. Okay?" He nodded. Simon looked at me, his eyes now soft. "You're better with him," he suddenly said. I looked at him. "Sir?" "Cody, after his mother left, he doesn't trust anyone. There's a nanny, but she treats it like just a duty. But seeing you, he seems happy for the first time. Like he's found someone who understands him." His voice held an emotion I'd never heard before. And I stood there in a park with my boss, taking care of his son. And I was realizing I was growing closer to them. And I was scared that if these relationships became part of my life, what would happen then? The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the playground equipment. Cody had moved to the sandbox, carefully maneuvering with his crutch, determined not to let his injury stop him from playing. Simon and I sat on a bench nearby, close enough to intervene if needed, but far enough to give Cody space. "He's resilient," I observed, watching Cody dig in the sand with one hand while balancing himself. "He gets that from his mother," Simon said quietly, then seemed to regret mentioning her. An uncomfortable silence settled between us. I decided to change the subject. "How long have you been running the company?" Simon leaned back, his expression thoughtful. 8 years. Took over from my father when Cody was born. Timing wasn't ideal, but life rarely waits for convenience. He watched his son with an intensity that spoke of both love and worry. Sometimes I wonder if I made the right choice. The company grew, but Cody grew up with a father who's always working. He doesn't seem to resent you for it, I said carefully. He talks about you constantly. How smart you are, how hard you work. He's proud of you. Simon's jaw tightened. Pride isn't the same as presence. I can give him everything money can buy, but I can't give him his mother back. I can't give him a normal childhood. Before I could respond, Cody called out, "Kevin, come build a castle with me." I glanced at Simon, who nodded. "Go ahead. I'll watch from here." I joined Cody in the sandbox, helping him construct an elaborate sandcastle with towers and walls. His laughter filled the air, genuine and carefree. When I looked back at Simon, something in his expression had shifted, a softness I'd never seen in the office, a vulnerability that he kept carefully hidden behind his CEO facade. "Kevin," Cody said seriously, patting sand into shape, "are you going to stay with us forever?" The question caught me off guard. "What do you mean? Like, will you be here tomorrow? And the day after? And all?" His small hands stilled, waiting for my answer with that child's desperate need for certainty. I chose my words carefully. "I'll be here as long as you and your father want me to be." It wasn't a promise I could guarantee, but it was honest. Cody seemed satisfied, returning to his sandcastle with renewed enthusiasm. But I felt Simon's eyes on me, felt the weight of that exchange settling between us like something tangible and important. When we finally left the park, Cody exhausted and happy, Simon carried him to the car while I walked alongside. "Thank you for today," Simon said as he buckled Cody into his car seat. "This meant a lot to him, to both of us." "It wasn't a burden," I replied. "I enjoyed it." Simon straightened, facing me fully. "Kevin, I know this situation is unusual. My son getting attached to my employee, blurring professional boundaries. If it makes you uncomfortable." "It doesn't," I interrupted. He's special. And this," I gestured vaguely at the park. "The afternoon we'd shared. This doesn't feel like work. It feels right." Simon studied me for a long moment, something unreadable flickering across his features. "Yes," he finally said. "It does." He cleared his throat, professional mask slipping back into place. "I'll see you Monday morning then." I watched them drive away, Cody waving enthusiastically through the back window until they turned the corner. My apartment felt emptier than usual when I returned, echoing with the absence of their presence. I'd spent just a few hours with them, yet somehow those hours had carved out a space inside me that hadn't existed before. I was getting attached to Cody certainly, but also to Simon in ways I didn't fully understand yet. The weekend passed slowly. I cleaned my apartment, caught up on laundry, tried to focus on a book I'd been meaning to read, but my thoughts kept drifting back to the park, to Cody's laughter and Simon's rare smile, to the way Simon had looked at me when I'd said it felt right. There had been something in that look, something that made my heart beat faster and my hands shake slightly when I thought about it too closely. Monday would bring us back to professional distance, back to the carefully maintained boundaries of boss and employee. But something had shifted fundamentally. We'd crossed an invisible line, and I wasn't sure if either of us knew how to step back across it, or if we even wanted to. 2 more weeks passed, and now Cody stayed with me every day while Simon was in meetings. I helped him with homework, ate lunch with him, and sometimes told him simple stories. All of this felt strange to me because I'd never imagined this would be part of my life. But now when I came to the office, seeing Cody's face had become my necessity, and Simon no longer seemed as strict and distant as before. One day, I noticed Simon looked more stressed than usual. He sat in his cabin, hands covering his face. After hesitating twice, I went inside. "Sir, is everything all right?" He looked at me, exhausted. "Board meeting tonight. It'll run late, and I have to take Cody with me because the nanny is sick and there's no backup." I felt this was my moment. "Sir, if you'd like, I can keep Cody with me. He can come to my place." Simon looked at me with surprised eyes. "Your home?" I laughed awkwardly. "Yes. I live close by. And Cody is comfortable with me. I'll take care of him." Simon thought for a few seconds before saying, Kevin, this is too much. You already do so much at the office. I can't ask you to, sir. I interrupted him. It's not too much. I want to truly. Simon looked into my eyes, as if confirming I was telling the truth. Then he nodded. All right, but just tonight. And if there's any problem? Sir, there won't be any problem. I promised. That evening when I took Cody to my apartment, he started exploring my home for the first time. It's small here, he said innocently. I laughed. Yes. But cozy, right? Cody nodded. I like it. Papa's house is very big. Sometimes it feels lonely. Nobody plays with me. Hearing this made my heart ache. I made dinner for him. Simple mac and cheese. And he ate with such happiness as if he'd tasted homemade food for the first time. This is so tasty, he said. Kevin, you cook well. Thank you, I said with a smile. My mother taught me. She said cooking is essential, wherever you are. Kevin, he suddenly said, will you always stay with me? I stopped at his words. What do you mean? I mean, will you ever leave? Like Mama did. Something inside me shattered. I looked at him and composed myself. Cody, I'm not going anywhere. I promise you. He grabbed my hand. Really? Really? I said. When Simon arrived late that night, he found Cody sleeping on my couch while I sat beside him working on my laptop. He looked at me and said nothing. We just looked at each other. Then he quietly gestured toward the hallway. I understood and got up. We both stepped outside, closing the door gently. Thank you, he said again. I stood up. Sir, this wasn't a big deal. It's a big deal to me, he said, adjusting his jacket. Cody trusts you. And I'm trusting you too. Hearing this created warmth in my chest. I was about to say something, but Simon spoke first. Kevin, I want to tell you something. I looked at him. His eyes met mine, and for a moment, I saw in them what I'd never expected, vulnerability. I live a very lonely life, he said. Cody is everything to me. But sometimes I feel like I'm not enough for him. I can never fill the void his mother left. And then you came, and you gave him what I couldn't genuine care. Sir, you, Simon, he said. When we're not at the office, call me Simon. I nodded. Simon, you're a very good father. Cody knows that. Simon smiled slightly, but the sadness remained in his eyes. Perhaps. But I want to thank you. You've helped not just Cody but me as well. He stepped a bit closer. And suddenly, the atmosphere changed. I couldn't understand what I was feeling. I don't want to burden you, Simon said. But Cody, he can't live without you now. And I might not be able to either. He left his sentence unfinished. My heartbeat accelerated. Simon, I said softly. I can understand. He looked at me, confusion in his expression. Kevin, I'm just saying that I'm getting attached to you too. I said, honestly speaking, my heart. To Cody. And to you as well. Simon looked at me for several seconds, as if he couldn't believe he'd heard correctly. Then he took a long breath. This is complicated. I know, I said. You're my boss. I'm your employee. This is all wrong. Yes, Simon said. Absolutely wrong. But he took another step forward. Yet still, I can't stop thinking about you. And in that moment, only a few inches separated us. But neither of us took that first step. Because we both knew if we crossed this line, everything would change. The air between us felt charged, electric, with possibility and danger in equal measure. His cologne reached me, something expensive and understated, mixing with the faint scent of his day, coffee and stress, and determination. I should take Cody home, Simon finally said, stepping back. It's gotten very late. I nodded. Yes, of course. But neither of us moved immediately. We stood there in my small hallway, the city sounds muted through the walls, existing in this bubble where rules didn't quite apply yet. Kevin, Simon said, his voice rougher than usual. What we're doing here, what we're feeling, it could destroy both our careers. The company has strict policies about relationships between supervisors and subordinates. If the board found out, I know, I said quietly. I've read the employee handbook. Then you understand this can't happen. It wasn't a question. I understand, I agreed. But my heart was screaming the opposite. Simon ran his hand through his hair, messing up the perfect styling for the first time since I'd known him. He looked younger suddenly, more human, less like the untouchable CEO everyone feared. I should go wake Cody, he said, but still didn't move. Simon, I started, then stopped, unsure what I wanted to say. How could I tell him that these past weeks had become the most meaningful of my life? That watching him with his son had shown me a side of masculinity I'd never witnessed. Strength and tenderness combined. That somewhere between helping Cody with homework and sharing knowing glances across the office, I'd started falling for him. Don't, Simon said softly. Please don't say whatever you're about to say, because if you do, I won't be able to walk away tonight. His honesty stripped away all pretense. We stood there, two people who'd found something precious and impossible, knowing we should let it go but unable to quite manage it. Finally, Simon moved past me, careful not to touch me as he went to collect his sleeping son. I watched him lift Cody with practiced ease, the child barely stirring. At my door, Simon paused. This changes nothing, he said, but his eyes told a different story. We'll be professional, appropriate. We'll forget this conversation happened. Of course, I said, knowing it was a lie we both needed to tell ourselves. After they left, I stood alone in my apartment. My hands were shaking, and I knew I was falling in love with him. With Simon. And this fear was killing me. Because if this all ended, what would I do? How could I go back to a life that didn't include them, now that I knew what it felt like to be needed, to be wanted, to matter to someone in this profound way? The following week at the office felt somewhat strange. Simon and I were trying to remain professional, but every time our eyes met, everything seemed to pause for a second. Cody knew nothing. He was happy in his own world, spending time with me every day. But Simon and I, we were both close and distant simultaneously. It was Friday when Simon called me into his cabin. I entered, expecting perhaps some work-related discussion. But when he turned from his chair to face me, his eyes held something entirely different. Kevin, what is this? He pushed a photo toward me. I approached and saw it was Cody's drawing, showing a family he'd created. A tall man, small child, and another person who looked like me. Cody made this? I asked. Yes. And he wrote, my family. Simon studied my face. He's included you in his family. I fell silent. I couldn't understand what to say. Sir, you're not just anything, Kevin. Simon interrupted me, and this time he stood from his chair and stepped toward me. You've become so integrated into our lives that now Cody can't function without you. Every night he mentions your name. Every morning he's excited to see you. And he controlled his voice. I can't manage without you either. My heart stopped. Was Simon really saying this? Simon, I'm just doing my job. No, he said, taking another step toward me. You're doing far more than that. You've become for Cody what I couldn't give him. You understand him. You care for him. And for me, he paused. I didn't know I could become this comfortable with someone. Talking to you, seeing you, all of this, it's become necessary. His voice was softer now. Cody loves you. And he stopped mid-sentence. My breath caught. Simon, all of this is wrong. Simon completed my thought. Yes, perhaps it is. I'm your boss. Your CEO. And all of this, it's not ethical. There are company policies, workplace relationships are prohibited. But he took another step forward anyway. But I don't care. Something broke inside me. I couldn't tell if this was real or a dream. Simon, I said his name, and though it wasn't the first time, this time my voice held something different. Emotion. He stopped, standing directly in front of me. I'm attached to your son. I'm attached to you. But I don't want this to happen for the wrong reasons. Simon took my hand. Then tell me the right reason. I looked into his eyes. Because I've started falling in love with you. As soon as I said it, I'd exposed myself completely. My heart was beating so fast I thought he might hear it. Simon looked at me for several seconds, then pulled me into an embrace. Me too, he said, relief evident in his voice. I love you too, Kevin. And I know this is complicated. I know this is risky. In the workplace, with all of this, what will people say? What will the board say? But I don't want to lose you. Tears came to my eyes. I'm not going anywhere. When we separated, Simon held my face in his hands. Kevin, this won't be easy. We'll have to be careful. Professional at the office. But here at home, just the three of us, there we can be real. I nodded. I understand. Suddenly the door opened and Cody entered. Simon and I quickly separated. Papa. Kevin, he said, coming toward me. What were you talking about? Simon smiled and picked up Cody. Yes, buddy. Something important. What? Cody asked curiously. Simon looked at me, then at Cody. We were discussing how Kevin will always be with us now. Do you like that? Cody's eyes lit up. Really? Always? I smiled and said, yes. Cody, always. Cody hugged me. Yay. Now we're a family. Simon looked at both of us and smiled. And in that moment I understood this was my family. And I couldn't exist without them. Whatever the world might say, whatever might happen at the office, these three people, Simon, Cody and me, we were one. Later, after Cody fell asleep, Simon and I stood on the balcony, watching the city lights. Kevin, Simon said, I want this to happen slowly, for Cody's sake, and for yours too. I held his hand. I understand, and I'm ready. Simon kissed my hand and pressed it to his chest. Thank you, he said, for coming into mine and Cody's life. No, I said. Thank you for giving me the feeling of belonging. And that night we both made a silent promise that whatever the world might say, we wouldn't leave each other's side. Because love isn't just between two people, it also builds families. And this was our family. The city sprawled below us. Millions of lights representing millions of lives, each with their own complications and joys. Somewhere down there were people who would judge us, who would say this was inappropriate or unprofessional. The board members who'd question Simon's judgment, colleagues who'd whisper about favoritism. But up here on this balcony with the cool night air around us, none of that seemed to matter. I need to tell you something else, Simon said, his thumb tracing circles on my hand. About Cody's mother. I tensed, unsure if I wanted to hear this, but knowing I needed to. Sarah and I, we weren't in love. It was an arrangement between families. Very traditional, very practical. When she got pregnant with Cody, we tried to make it work. But after he was born, she struggled. Postpartum depression, the doctor said, though she refused treatment. He paused, his grip on my hand tightening. The accident wasn't really an accident. She drove into that tree deliberately, left a note saying she couldn't be the mother Cody deserved, couldn't be the wife I needed. For years I blamed myself, should have seen the signs, should have gotten her help, should have done something different. Simon, let me finish, he said gently. I'm telling you this because you need to understand what you're getting into. Cody doesn't remember her, which is both a blessing and a curse. He asks about her sometimes, and I never know what to say. How do you explain to a child that his mother loved him but couldn't stay? That sometimes love isn't enough to fix everything. You tell him the truth, I said quietly, age appropriately but honestly, that she was sick in a way that wasn't visible, that she made a choice nobody could have prevented, that it wasn't his fault or yours. Children are more resilient than we give them credit for. Simon looked at me with something like wonder. How did you get so wise? I'm not wise, I protested. I see Cody. Really see him. And he's incredible. Simon. He's kind and funny and so full of love, despite everything he's lost. That's because of you. Because you've been there, consistently, even when it was hard. Even when you didn't know what you were doing. I'm still figuring it out, Simon admitted. Every day is trial and error. And now with you. He turned to face me fully. With you, I feel like maybe I don't have to figure it out alone anymore. Like maybe we can build something good together. Something stable for Cody to grow up in. We can, I said, believing it with everything in me. We will. Simon leaned forward, his forehead resting against mine. And in that moment everything felt possible. The obstacles seemed surmountable, the future bright with potential. We stood there until the chill drove us inside. Until exhaustion made us acknowledge that tomorrow would come with all its complications. But tonight, we had this hope and love and the beginning of something that felt like home.